Please join me in welcoming Dr. Lining Yao. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
So yeah, thanks for everyone for coming here and for being with me. So my subject of talk today is sustainable bites, and it is around the idea of engineering morphing food. I run a research lab at Carnegie Mellon University called Morphing Matter Lab. We don't only work on food, but today the main subject is food. But I want to just kind of open up the topic a little bit to introduce you guys what our lab does in general. So we basically design all kinds of morphing matter, and these could be paper-based, thermoplastic, it could be silicone material, and it could be edible material. And the general idea is to combine material science and computational design and also digital fabrication to think about the adaptive and reconfigurable materials and also the design implications of those materials in our daily life. And we happened to work on a few food-related applications, and that will be the main focus of today. And in my lab, the researchers generally work across different disciplines. You know, they're chemists, but also designers and engineers. And when we work on morphing fabric, for example, we might bring some of those dancing fabrics on a fashion stage. And when we work with food, we like to collaborate with chefs. So there are always collaborations both within my lab, but also beyond with more professional creatives. Generally speaking, so in the lab, we study basically the mechanisms and mechanics of smart materials. And food material is one type of smart materials. And we also engineer the kind of computational design platform. You will hear me talking about how we leverage computational design tools and also 3D printers to fabricate some of our food material today. And we also think about, broadly speaking, different application contexts to hopefully push the societal impact of these reconfigurable and responsive and transformative materials. And talking about societal impact, our lab has a growing interest in thinking of sustainability, especially thinking of the design of morphing matter in the context of sustainability. And we think there are a lot of things we can change about the way we make, wear, grow, and eat to make our lifestyle more sustainable. And I'm gonna focus on eat today. Think about the way we eat, and of course, think about the way we design our food. So that brings us to today's topic about sustainable bites. Think about, again, the sustainable context in terms of our food experience. It's holistic, right? So food packaging, for example, is one of the largest sources of plastic waste. How can we save some of those food packaging space or get rid of the plastic in the packaging space? And also, even just cooking food, you consume energy, and there are a lot of heated water. And in Italy, for example, 0.7 to 1% of green gas emission is due to the cooking and consuming of dry pasta. So these become unignorable when we talk about sustainable efforts in food. And a more concrete example, if you think about the macaroni pasta, and if we assume they are packed in a hexagonal lattice, so you could calculate over 67% of the packaging space is wasted for packing air. So it basically means if you eat spaghetti rather than macaroni pasta, you can save a lot of packaging space. So you are saving a lot of plastic waste in this case. So that really promotes us to think about this concept of flat packaging for food. It wasn't our intention to make all the food flat, because we also think, food is a living experience. is cultural, and the shape of the food is a lot to do with the texture, mouthfeel, the enjoyable experiences. And how can we not sacrifice the unique texture 3D food can bring us, however, save the packaging space when we transport the food, when we manufacture the food, when we store the food. So that really brings us the concept of flat pack food that can morph into the 3D shape when you cook them. And this idea was also highly inspired by how IKEA or other furniture company, leveraging flat pack furniture to save their shipping cost and packaging space. So again, the concept here is, can we make food flat? And that's easy to pack. But then when you cook them or when you consume them, they somehow magically turn into 3D. And this is what this illustration is trying to show. And we looked into this kind of basic concept of differential swelling ratios of different edible material. So for example, both starch and gelatin can swell a lot. However, the swelling ratio and rate are different. Imagine if you make a bilayer, one layer is made of starch, the other layer gelatin, and if they swell at different rate, it's possible to push a flat shape into 3D when you hydrate it, basically when you put them in water. And we really pretty much stick to this hypothesis or design principle and started to make morphing food. And this is a microscope image. What you see is at the center region, they are both rising. However, the center region rises more slowly than the two edges. That's because the center region has a cellulose that's printed on top of a gelatin sheets. However, on the edges, there are only gelatin, no cellulose. That's why we're started to, tune sort of the rising or swelling ratio of different regions of the edible material. And you can go a little bit more systematic to explore this behavior. So again, if you started to print cellulose, which is less swellable, on top of a gelatin film, you can then morph a flat gelatin sheets into a different 3D shape. And this is some videos to show both experimentally on the top and also numerically at the bottom how a flat sheet can start to morph into different shape when you place those in water. And depends on the density of the cellulose pattern, you can get different dynamic transformation behaviors. And you can also be creative about the shape, the initial shape you want. So I showed that, a flat sheet can turn into almost like a cylinder, and you could also make a disc turn into a saddle shape. The saddle is pretty much, how our potato chips look like. And you can also, by controlling how many rings of the cellulose you print on top of the saddle, to control the precise bending curvature of this saddle shape. And you can then from there push further the complexity of the shape. So again, on the most left side, you see this flat shape. And then on the most right, you see all the food after morphing, after it's being placed in water for some time. So this is a video to just show the whole process of us making it and also trigger the transformation behavior of it. And again, remind you guys, this is made of a gelatin, basically a jello film with cellulose, edible cellulose on top of it. And it was developed when I was still a student at MIT Media Lab. So a lot of the collaborators are from MIT. And this is just right now, we are showing how we prepare the raw gelatin material. So basically we dissolve gelatin particles in water, we make it a solution, we load it into a syringe and mount the syringe on a 3D printer and started to print this, basically this film. And we also developed a tool and basically, novice designers can rely on the tool and design the shape they want. And these are real samples. So when we produce them, print them, they are all flat. And when you dip them in water, they started to swell. They swell into different shapes. we try to make them yellow, and also we try to make them look like some of the conventional pasta shape, because we thought pasta is an interesting food product to sell this morphing material concept, because pasta are very rich in its shape. So again, all the images you see here, they are already after morphing. Before, they are all flat. And there's a fun thing we did back then. We worked with a chef in Boston. So actually, it's one of the fanciest French cuisine restaurant we get to work with. And the chef recommended us some basically tasteful food ingredients we can add into our raw morphing material. And he started to design dishes. So this, for example, this black helix is made of squid ink. And this one we call it a morphing saddle. And this reddish one is made of a mushroom flavor. And he started to basically compose our morphing ingredients with the other raw ingredients in his restaurant. And this is one of my favorite demos. So here you basically have a transparent flat film, but once you dip it in water, it'll wrap the caviar around it and form a cannoli. And then you can just take it out. I like it because I wanted to make a self-folding dumpling for my mom, but dumplings are hard. Yeah, a little cannoli was much easier for us to do. But you can see it does save some of the chef's effort to actually wrap the food. And this last demo shows basically the idea is called self-chopping food. So if you cook the food in water for a shorter duration, it stay like long noodle. But if you basically wait for long enough, it chop itself into smaller pieces and also wrap itself into a cylinder. So the concept is you could then think about cooking noodles of different sizes within one pot, within one go. So for example, maybe your grandma or your children will prefer shorter noodles for easier digestion, but you might prefer longer ones because of the texture. But now you can cook both types within one pot. And go back to a little bit of the practical side of things. So we did touch upon a few design concepts within this co-creation session with the chef. So first point, right? How do we pack food? So I already mentioned a few times, if you pack the food flat, your raw ingredients flat, you can save a lot of packaging space. But second, also, how do we prepare food? So if the food can self-wrap and even interact with the sauce, right? In this case, the caviar around it, you suddenly are saving also the preparation effort of the chef, either at home or in kitchen. And then lastly, how can we cook more efficiently? If we started to cook food with different flavor, different shape in a very programmable and controllable way, all within one go, you are cutting the green gas emission. Basically, you are saving your fuels. So I think these concepts, these questions, I think are really kind of driving us further and further to design food. And story last till here, you may want to ask, how about pasta? And I told you guys all the very nice looking shapes, they were made of jello, and jello are not commodity food. And to create real world impact, we really wanted to make commodity food like pasta, like bread, to be able to morph and to be able to flat pack. So another incentive to look more into pasta, as I said, was also because pasta was just by nature very rich in shape space. And there are strong reasons why pastas are made in different shape. If you talk to Italian, they will tell you there are very specific pairing between the pasta shape and the sauce. So for example, the one with grooves, you can carry more thinner sauce. And the ones that have inner holes, you can carry, little chunks of meat and sausage and things like that. It's all very specific. We don't want to sacrifice this enriched eating experience, but how can we make pasta flat? And I showed this page again just because it's so essential to our design concept. If we can make macaroni pasta packed flat, we can really save a lot of packaging space. And that is true for most of the 3D shaped pasta. And pasta, the main material of semolina flour, which is what pasta is made of, is starch. So starch is a very readily swelling material, and everybody knows that. When you cook pasta, you can see the pasta started to grow fatter and also softer. That's just because starch is being swollen in a heated temperature. And I do wanted to also point out the manufacturing technique I just showed you guys, the 3D printing of liquid solution is not gonna work for dough, for pasta dough, because you who have experiences making your own pasta at home, we make dough by mixing them, basically agitate, because you have to grow a gluten network, and then the pasta dough become very viscoelastic. It's very hard to print. And similar bilayer principle I just showed you guys to make the jello morph is not gonna work for pasta. And also we do not want it to change the raw ingredients of pasta. Pasta authentically is made of semolina flour and water. That's it. There's no cellulose that's less swelling, readily available for us to use. And we don't want it to add extra additives. So in order to make pasta morph, we had to think about new morphing technique. So what this diagram is showing, this mechanism that's called groove-induced morphing mechanism. So it's actually super simple. You basically just introduce surface grooves on a flat sheeted dough, and the groove will tune the swelling behavior. Basically, the part that are grooved, will swell more slowly than the part that are not grooved. And this differential swelling behavior eventually will cause the flat pasta to morph into 3D when you cook them. At the bottom, if you guys can see my cursor, actually, maybe you can't, sorry. At the bottom, you can see those flat stripe with parallel surface grooves turn into a helical shape when you cook them. So again, here we shows more principles of how these morphing pasta are designed. On the top left, we are trying to show the specific geometry of the groove can affect the bending curvature. So, and at the bottom is just a more quantitative way to say the same thing. So if you change the width of the groove, and you can see the curvature will be affected. And on the right, which shows a variety of different pasta. This is authentic semolina made flour. It's authentic semolina flour made pasta can morph from flat to 3D. We also ran some numeric simulation to just theoretically validate the morphing principle. And most of the final element analysis were done by Professor Teng Zhang at Syracuse University. He has been really collaborating with us on morphing food for many years. And these are some of the higher resolution photography of the morphing pasta. On the left-hand side, these were pasta, either dry or wet. But they were produced flatly, and on the plate, these are pasta after being cooked and after morphing. And again, flat, straight, after boiling, they will turn into helix. And there are just more examples. And if you see, you can actually tell how the grooves are designed on the surface of the dough. And depends on how you align the grooves, you can get different transformation behaviors as well in this case. And yeah, this is just a collection of the morphing pasta. And in this case, we did not use printer, but we did use a robotic arm. So in this case, we actually customized a stamp. And then you mount the stamp as a tool head on top of a machine, a numerically controlled machine. And then you can basically push up and down to create the grooves. And you can control the machine to go to the exact location where you want to generate the groove, and then it will automatically push down. And this is a video to show what I just said. And again, the machine is moving to a location, turn to the right angle that are predefined in computer, and then push down to create this to create the groove. And this is on the top, these are real pasta. At the bottom, these are numerical simulations. And we run many cooking tests in the lab, and often they take about 5 to 12 minutes for it to fully cooked and transform. And this is just to show different shapes are being cooked. And the 3D shape will stay as 3D. And there are very interesting sort of principles and the reasons why they stay as 3D, because when you cook them, the starch also undergo chemical changes. So the structure changed, and also the protein within the pasta also undergoes structure changes. That's why the 3D morphing becomes permanent. And this is my postdoc who went on a hiking trip with this flat pack pasta. So she basically packed them into a small paper box. And once on site, she was able to use just a portable gas cooker to cook herself some morphing pasta. And we envision this morphing pasta can be used in many contexts. We just showed the mountain hikers, this could be interesting, but also for other scenarios where the packaging space are very sensitive topic. For example, disaster food, side food delivery, or for space travel. Or we also think this could be interesting for supermarket or kitchen that require large inventory, like large storage space. For example, like a big corporations kitchen, or even a boat. And also a good enriched experiences in high-end restaurants. This could be interesting when the chef is cooking morphing food in front of their customer. And finally, we also mentioned this might be helpful for saving the green gas emission. And again, bring back to the topic, just the process of cooking, bring in a lot of green gas. And this was more of a pleasant discovery post-thinking. But the idea is the shape of the groove, the shape of the pasta can affect how long it will take for you to cook them. And there are research studies shows that for macaroni pasta, they have inner cavities, and this will basically consume more time to cook. And for our pasta, because it's flat, and also because the surface groove can increase the surface contact area between the water and the pasta, you actually can effectively shorten the time you need for cooking. So this will result in saved green gas emission. Again, we haven't really quantified how much you will save in terms of the cooking time. So this was more of a theoretical conclusion at this stage. And beyond pasta, you could also leveraging this groove principle to make dehydrated food morph. I'm talking about cookies or baked food. So here it shows flatly made cookie dough. They can turn into a folded flour after being baked, and more morphed shapes. And one fun idea we thought goes back to saving the preparation effort. One fun idea we thought was to basically leverage to make self-wrapping tacos. So after you place on the sauce, the wrappers will just automatically fold up. And how to compute food geometry. This question was asked a lot after we published the morphing pasta paper. So many chefs, including some big food corporations, they were interested in our technique. But the question they often asked was, how do you think about designing shapes? What shapes are possible? What are not? So if our company is about to adapt your technology, how can we even think about the shape space? So which brought us to think about, the good way to share basically the computational design principle behind morphing food. And we started by doing some case-by-case analysis. So in this figure, we're showing the design principle behind helical coils. So if you introduce parallel lines of groove, you can induce a helical morphing motion, and depends on the tilting angle of those parallel lines relative to the longitudinal direction of the stripe, you can control the pitch, basically how tight the helix is. And there's another principle that's very generalizable called center symmetrical lines of groove. Here we shows there are many conical geometries you can create if you induce basically center symmetrical lines of grooves into your structure. And depends on the density of those center symmetrical lines, you can basically control how, again, the sort of the bending curvature of these conical shapes. And these are just some extended examples of conical shapes. If you combine different conical primitives together, you can make interesting flowers, for example. And we were pretty happy at this point to kind of share the design principles. But then soon we realized after chatting with Chef, these are still too abstract for kind of, technical people or people who are naturally interested in computer graphics or graphics in general, or geometrical processing. Those are good enough as principles. But for professional chef, these are still too abstract. So we started to again think about the idea of designing a tool. An inverse tool means you just need to tell the tool what you want, and the tool tell you what the groove should look like. So in this case, for example, if I want a flower, the chef or the designer can basically input a flower shape, and then our platform can analyze the geometry you want, automatically flatten it in a computer, and analyze the curvatures, and then convert that into finally a groove lines, and then generate automatically a final shape and show you. And we do think this is the ultimate answer to the chef's question. So now you just need to tell the computer what you want, right? And we'll tell you what's the flat shape that can create the morphed shape you eventually want. And with that inverse design pipeline, we were able to push the complexity of those morphing structures. Here you can see a flat shape can turn into a rose flower. And there's a video to show some of those shapes. And this is the transformation process of the rose flower. And we say this is universal because yes, it works for food, but this morphing mechanism also works beyond food. Any swelling materials basically can morph in this way. Yeah, and it also shows some of the helix I mentioned in the earlier design principle. For example, this is the helix. And for pasta, like I said, it's not dancing all over. It basically morph and lock the shape. But for other material that doesn't go through chemical changes, the shape is reversible. It morphs into 3D. It eventually recovers back to flat. And my last topic is related to advanced manufacturing of food for space and Earth. So beyond the study of kind of scientific mechanisms and mechanics, we're also very interested in pushing the digital fabrication platform of food. So this had been a really long-term interest of mine. Personally, even back in 2016, again, when I was still a student, I worked with my colleagues at MIT Media Lab to think about how to basically leverage robotic arm and other smart machines to co-create with the chef. We think about different possible tool heads, of course, extrusion heads, but also, smart cutters and the smart spray head. You could, for example, based on how many people will consume a pizza, to cut precisely the right numbers of slices with the machine. You could also use a robotic arm to generate sugar fibers, for example, in a very, very controllable way. If you talk to a sugar artist, they will tell you the temperature is very essential. So there are only a very narrow temperature range you can really manipulate sugar. And we basically by mounting a thermal camera to the robotic arm, we are able to let the machine tell when is the right timing to manipulate the sugar. And depends on the temperature. When you start to pull the fiber, you can generate either each individual fiber or like a membrane. That's also to do with the physics of how the melted sugar work. But you can start to see even back then, we were sort of tinkering around the idea of how people can work with AI, with the intelligent machine that's equipped with a third eye, that's a thermal camera, to co-create food material and food products. And very recently, we brought this kind of robotic fabrication concept of food into a competition called by NASA. So they give a very constrained space, and then they say, hey, design a kitchen. So we propose idea that's around a additive manufacturing robotic arm. And I wanted to just share a little bit of fun experiments we did around this competition. So 3D printing is not new anymore. Not new on Earth, not new in space. But there are always known challenges. For example, the physics are very different. Things don't work the same way under microgravity. So surface tension, for example, gonna play a very important role in the space when we think about extrusion-based printing. And food, one challenge about printing food is that, food material is very rich. So they come with different viscosity, for example, and they come with different surface tension, and they interact between each other and interact with the printing substrate as well. So one solution we had was to borrow this concept called embedded printing that was pretty much a well-known practice in tissue engineering, and repurpose it for food printing. So the idea is you make a support bath that is often very, in tissue engineering context, they say biocompatible, but indeed a lot of the support bath, they make them out of gelatin, which is edible. So I'm just gonna say we make support bath that's edible. And then we directly print another additional food material into the support bath. So suddenly you could save a lot of your headaches around, surface tension, microgravity, whether your material going to float all over in space. That level of headaches are all saved. And we are able to show basically you can print very thin material, known as challenging material to print in 3D, such as, melted chocolates, very thin dough. You often make, for example, your sour bread with very thin dough. And also gelatin rich material or material that include micronutrients like vitamin or minerals. And we run also a workshop with the chef, and all the materials we chose have about 3-year shelf life. So it basically fits the requirement of NASA. They say, hey, how can you basically store raw materials in space and keep using it for 3 years for your robotic kitchen? And this is a video to show how the embedded printing work. This is when we are printing chocolate into the edible support bath. And there was some reason why we wanted to show the printing of chocolate. You might think, hey, it's not practical at all. When you try to feed the astronauts, you should have some high fat, compact food, very efficient food. But one of this inherent vision we had was, space travel and living in space is gonna become a lifestyle. And food is very important. It's not only to do with your physical health, but also mental health. When the astronauts, or maybe in the future, even normal citizens, have to stay in a long duration in space travel, how can we create very enriched food experience? Not only just to make people survive, but also to make people enjoy the food, and how to create Earth-like food in space, such as bread and pasta. So in that sense, not only embedded printing, but our flat pack pasta become very essential, because you can think about how important space saving is when we talk about space travel. So in conclusion, we do many kinds of applications in the lab, but food has never left our scope, just because we truly believe food as a research subject is very enriching. It brings in different disciplines. If you think about edible beats at the core, there are interaction design, materials, mechanism, digital fabrications that are all relevant. And then if you expand a little bit, there's also behavior science, health, nutrition, biology, even AI, computer vision, mechatronics. And of course, on the expanded scope, there are also the culture, nature, survival, all these subjects we have to basically keep in mind when we work with food context. And when we work with sustainable food context, we also want to think about, this creative, smart material. They're inherently interesting and cool, but how we also think about, practically speaking, how we recycle, how we enable good packaging, efficient transport, effective cooking, eating, this holistic experience. So this really defines our mission in the lab. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody who are involved in creating the projects I shared, and also the funding agency for our projects. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you so much for that.